Commence our service on page 3. We join in prayer. Top of page 3. We enter this sanctuary to welcome Shabbat. Within these walls, we sit surrounded by numberless generations. Our ancestors built the synagogue as a visible sign of God's presence in their midst. Throughout our long history and our endless wanderings, it has endured, a beacon of truth, love, and justice for all humanity. Its presence guided our ancestors to lives of righteousness, holding up to them a vision of their selves. Now we, in our turn, come into this sanctuary to affirm the sacredness of our lives. May we enter this place in peace. May holiness wrap around us as we cross its threshold. Weariness, doubt, the flaws within our human hearts, the harshness of the weak, let these drop away at the door. In the brightness of Shabbat, let peace settle upon us as we lift our hearts in prayer. I now invite Iris and Nate Ginsburg to light the Shabbat candles.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who hold, so may we in time give light to all who hold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light.
Fourth of July.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvah, and may we kindle the light of Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק נר של שבת.
Our service continues now with a musical meditative piece by Bach, the Prelude in C major. Our service continues now on page 8 with the singing of Lachadodi. We will chant verses 1 and 2, and when we come to verse 9 on the following page, we will skip the following verses. We'll go to verse 9. Just by way of introduction, this is also a hymn about the return to Zion and the return to Jerusalem. And it ushers in at the very conclusion the Messianic era, when all Jews in the tradition will return to Israel, and that will be the beginning of the Messianic era. So it has this vision of peace, and where everyone is living in peace with one another. And that is that relates to the Shabbat. How so? The Talmud teaches us that Shabbat, that when we celebrate and when we observe Shabbat, we are experiencing 1/60th of heaven. We continue now with Lachadodi, verses 1 and 2, and then verse 9.
Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor v'dibur echad, Hishmi'anu el ha'muchad, Adonai echad, u'shemo echad, l'shemo tiferet v'litila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lekovanecha, ki makor habracha, mirosh mikedem nisucha, sof nase b'machshavat tikra. Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Ohi v'shalom ateret mala, gam b'simcha v'tzola, toch emunei am segula, boi chala, lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
You may be seated. Our service continues now with the Shalom Aleichem on page 10.
Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Melech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lechem la shalom,
Peace be to you, O ministering angels, messengers of the Most High, Majesty of majesties, Holy One of blessing. Our service continues now with the Chatzi Kaddish on page 11. And at the conclusion of the Chatzi Kaddish on page 11, we'll rise for the Baruch Hu. You may be seated. Let us join in prayer on page 13, the second full paragraph. Together, this is an hour of change. Within it, we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brothers, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brothers, my sisters, or cross over? Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. And let us continue now in the middle of page 14. We join in prayer. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbols, all these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love? That this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amod Yisrael. After.
וקשרתם לאות ידיך
And let us join in the responsive reading on page 18, In a World Torn by Violence. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed. We continue now with the Michamocha, page 19. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל Yisrael. Praised are you Adonai for redeeming Israel. We now continue with a reading on page 20. Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace, the prelude to the Hashkivenu. Together, grant, O God, that we lie down in peace and raise us up to our guardian, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel. For your name's sake, be our help. Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Defend us against enemies, illness, war, famine, and sorrow. Distance us from wrongdoing. For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going and coming to life and to peace evermore. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu Neshalom, V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim. Go ahead, take it away, Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu L'shalom, V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu L'shalom, V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim. Ushmor Tzidkenu, Uvoenu, L'chaim u'shalom, be'ata ve'olam. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu L'shalom, Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu L'shalom, V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu L'shalom, V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim. V'hamidenu Shomreinu L'chaim.
We continue now with the Vishamru on page 22.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat, L'dorotam, Berit olam, everyone. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat, L'dorotam, Berit olam, Bein Hilu vein Bnei Yisrael, Od Hi le'olam. Bein Hilu vein Bnei Yisrael, Od Hi le'olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai, et hashamayim v'et haaretz uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash. Bein Please rise for the Amidah. From page 27 through page 33. You may either do that standing or sitting, whichever you prefer, whatever your tradition. We continue silently.
Shalom, shalom, Ibrahim, Uyasi shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Israel, ve'imnu amen. Uyasi shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel, amen. Say shalom, shalom, Ibrahim. Uyasi shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Israel, ve'imnu amen. Ve'al kol Israel,
There's actually no commandment that a rabbi on Friday night must wear a tallit, so I'm going to leave that off for right now. So Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Many of us recall a term that seemed to develop in the 1960s, the generation gap. It referred to the dissonance of perspectives between the older and younger generations on a broad spectrum of issues that included social and cultural norms, ethics, and the things to be valued in life. In my life, I experienced this phenomenon in my relationship with my father on issues related to music. He was from the big band era and exposed me to that music as well as classical and Broadway. However, when the Beatles, the hippie movement, Vietnam, civil rights, the child rearing practices of Dr. Benjamin Spock, Woodstock, and the like, the gap was palpable, not in a hostile or antagonistic manner, but more like, quote, I just don't get it. And yes, even the wisdom of the Talmud and our wisdom literature did not prepare me for fatherhood. When my children began to get into their disco and their hip hop music, I just never got it. And at the same time, I remember the phrase when my children were born, I'll never do that, what my father did to my children, to me. Famous last words, huh? But I tried honestly. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, my children could even tell when I was, quote, faking it, as I was told many times. We too had our generation gap. Our Torah portion for this week reflects that struggle. From the elderly viewpoint of Moses in the beginning of his sermon to the Jewish people that begins this week's Parsha and will continue to the concluding chapter of Deuteronomy. The children of Israel are now on the banks of the Jordan River, and this new generation is poised to inherit the land, thus fulfilling God's promise to their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, and Leah. And the topic sentence to Devarim, or the book of Deuteronomy, captures Moses' state of mind. It refers both to the past and the present in his psyche, and I'll explain further on. Chapter 1, verse 12 provides, a verse that we actually did study in our Torah study class on Wednesday. What I'd like to do, this is actually chanted differently on Shabbat.
in traditional synagogues all over the world. And I'll pretend to be chanting the verse that precedes it. I'm just going to make it up. And then have you listen to how this verse, which is done to the Echa trope, which we'll chant on Saturday evening, just a portion of it. And you'll hear the lament and the cry as our ancestors imagined Moses' voice to be. So the verse before, I'll just sort of make it up. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe ba'et ahi le'mor Echa esa levadi Tarchechem u'ma'asachem v'rivchem. How will I alone bear your troubles, your burdens, and your strivings? The word Echa, of course, translates into how will I bear? But Echa is also the name of the book that we will read on Tisha B'Av in Hebrew, which translates as the Book of Lamentations. And the underlying tone of Moses is a lament. Traditionally, these struggles, these burdens and strivings were a reference to Moses adjudicating disputes each day between his fellow Jews. Moses would act as a judge day and night, resolving conflicts between his brethren. And Rashi provides that these terms, troubles, burdens, and strivings, were negative attributes of those who came before Moses. Now, during our study, Dr. Nate Ginsburg cited a commentary that the Israelites committed some transgression against God at each of the locations that follows Moses' lament. For Moses goes on to describe the various places wherein the children of Israel stopped without going into great detail. And some of those we remember: Korach's rebellion, the spies, most importantly, the spies' evil report regarding Israel's capability of conquering the land. It also involved places where they complained about the lack of food and water. Yet Moses does not provide any lengthy description of their rebellion, thus showing sensitivity to this generation, the new generation that had witnessed their parents' conduct. Miss Patricia Silverman observed that Moses was really not talking to those who died in the wilderness, and it was an accurate assessment. The ones who rebelled, they had all died. And now there was this new generation. And so the question is asked, to whom was Moses talking to? These people only witnessed the result. They did not experience the slavery of their parents. And so this generation that could go into the land was confident, and they are all ready to fulfill this ancient promise. And as one reads the text, and this was also pointed out in our Torah study, there is a certain bitterness and anger as Moses provides both counsel and reflection on his own life. And the question again is asked, to whom is Moses lamenting to? Indeed, Moses' discourse is much about the unspoken yet spoken. That is to say, how he perceives aspects of his life's work as his own life is rapidly approaching its end. So there are two ways to read this word Echa. One is contextual. I said to you at that time, how will I alone carry your burdens? And as I indicated, there is a break in the reading right before we come to this verse, and the melody of the Torah reflects that. There is a change. There is an existential sadness as this great man nears the completion of his life. He is carrying and will continue to hold the psychological burdens imposed upon him by leading contentious and troubled people. And so perhaps the question can be reframed in the following: how can I carry on today Without these people who now lie buried in the wilderness and not having resolved the load of our collective past. Let us now turn to one of the preeminent psychoanalysts of our time, Dr. Erik Erikson, who also, by the way, was Jewish. For those that weren't aware, Erik Erikson doesn't sound very Jewish, but he was in fact Jewish, and he too had a conflict. His conflict was that he didn't look Jewish. And so when he went to school, people thought he was not Jewish. But when he came home, he was Jewish. So his outer world and his inner world were in conflict. So Dr. Erikson, unlike Freud, focused on the psychosocial development of the human being and theorized that there were 8 stages of development, the final one occurring for those approximately 65 and older, to which I fall into, as you are all aware. His theoretical framework is working towards the resolution of the struggle between integrity and despair. W.S. Krauss, in his work, The Aging Individual, Physical and Psychological Perspectives, wrote the following: integrity refers to a feeling at peace with oneself and the world, having no regrets, having no recriminations. Despair relates to feelings of shame and loss of precious opportunities in life, the prevalent fear of life coming to an end. Helping to guide the person, however, is wisdom. How does one demonstrate such wisdom? Through calmness, tolerance, appropriate emotional detachment, non-projection, no regrets, non-judgment, peace of mind, spiritual and universal reconciliation, and finally, acceptance of inevitable departing life. I hope you realize that I don't think I know anyone, myself included, who has achieved this resolution entirely. Some of us struggle with the meaning of our lives, regrets for the road not taken, or things that we have done in our life that we wish we had not. Integrity and despair are on a spectrum, at each end of a spectrum, and we work throughout our life moderating these perspectives as we hope we gain wisdom through the years. And that's why the psalmist wrote, "Teach us, O God, to number our days so that we may attain a heart of wisdom." So let us now return to Moses. Indeed, the word echa is evidence of a despaired perspective of one's personal history. He has spent his entire life serving others and serving God with little self-regard. His profound disappointment in what has occurred and some of what might have been Imrak, if only people had acted differently. Imrak, if only then I could have reached the promised land. So the question now becomes, does Moses resolve these very human emotions and feelings? And the answer, I'll give a spoiler, is yes. He does resolve them. And how does he do that? We are told near the end of the book of Deuteronomy that he writes a Torah for each and every tribe. He then places a scroll, an additional scroll near the ark, and the broken shards of the Luchot Avadim, the tablets of stone, the tablets of the 10 Commandments that he had broken, inside the ark. Moses' great accomplishment, which he didn't realize when he began his sermon, wasn't that he led the people to the shores of the promised land. Moses' great accomplishment was living and teaching the Torah to his people. He gave them a legacy. And that is why we are here tonight, observing this Shabbat. If it didn't say so in the Torah, on some level, we would not be here, I promise you. we would not be here creating a Jewish spiritual community. The gift of the Torah is the symbol of wisdom and integrity. The broken shards of the tablets of stone, handwritten by God, represent the other end of the spectrum that many of us have felt: despair, the anger that comes from extraordinary disappointment. Echa esal levadi, how can I alone carry these burdens? The broken shards placed in the ark will be for generations to follow as they carry the ark forward. Bridging the generation gap is wisdom and our common humanity in all its dimensions. However, we cannot do it for them, nor like their parents who wandered in the wilderness, can our children do as we did. Instead, they must forge a new land wherein they will dwell, and they too will become parents, and then the following generation will create a people, a life of their own. Like Moses, we are on this spectrum of integrity and despair, but our challenge and the resolution is through what we live and how we live and how we transmit to the next generation. And so our challenge is to write our own Torah, as Moses did, place it in the ark for our children and our children's children to carry forward. Amen. Our service continues now with Shalom Rav on page 31.
Shalom Rava Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rava Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Ki atam melech adom lechol hashalom. Ki atam melech adom lechol hashalom. Shalom Ra Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Ra Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. V'tov b'necha levarech et Amcha Yisrael. בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רע ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רע ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם.
Our service continues now with the Misha Berach, page 34. We join in the middle of page 34. We will sing the first two lines. We'll pause and ask first the people on Zoom to either say out loud or to themselves the names of anyone in need of spiritual and physical healing, then the congregation, and then I'll read the list of those in need of such prayer and of such healing. first for people on Zoom. Turn out to the congregation as my eyes meet yours.
Elizabeth and Michael Morales and their children are covered. Jennifer Slender and Shimon Janelle.
And our prayers for healing this month includes Paul Bradley, Alan Hall, Robin Mayer, Charmaine Moser, and Mark Siegel. Before we turn to the Alenu, you'll notice that you might have noticed that there are two names that we've been praying for that we did not announce because we think that they have been healed. One is our dear Molly, who we know was in the hospital for a while, and just as important, tentatively, I'm told, tentatively Sunday, their little baby girl, and this is where the fun begins, Nora will be able to come home. So we're praying that Sunday will be the magic day, and we're just so thrilled. Please rise for the Alleluia on page 35. Please. This week, we observe the yard sites of Miriam Zelniker, Louis Loeb, May Dalton, Benjamin Gold, and Jean Barkin. Is there anyone observing a yard site or saying Kaddish for someone who they wish to remember at this time?
Miriam and Arnold Watkins who perished in that collapsed building.
Thank you.
Leonard Ray Leland.
In solemn testimony to that unbroken faith which links generations one to another, that those who mourn now rise and join in the recitation of the Kaddish for mourners and those observing yahrzeit, and those whose tradition it is to join in its recitation. Page 43. Yikadal, Yikadash, Me'aba, Bialma, Divrachi, Vite, Biamlichna, Vite, B'chayechon, V'yomechon, V'chaye, V'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, V'zman Kari, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Le'olam Ule'olmei Olmaya. Yitborach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'al v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha v'yichu le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata ta'amiran v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May God, who establishes peace unto the heavens, grant peace and comfort in the hearts of all who mourn, and let us say, amen. Now you may be seated. We now call on our president, Gil, to read the announcements. No? Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. It's not on my list. Excuse me. Amy, please. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Number one, I'd like to thank you, Rabbi, for leading us in a very beautiful service and inspiring us. And also thank our music trio for just enriching our service week after week. It's even better here in person. And Andy for keeping us connected. So, tomorrow night, there'll be Tish B'Av service that begins at 7 p.m. here at the temple with Havdalah. And then you can read about it. It's in the high notes. Rabbi Boraz wants to visit with many congregants as possible. And beginning in August 6th, we'll begin to use our prayer books. And if you're on Zoom and you need a prayer book, you can either order it yourself. Just a little, the gift shop has a few to sell if you need it. And then on Thursday evening, the Mobile Area Jewish Federation is having a get-together at the Medal of Honor Park. That information is also in the high notes. So wonderful to see everybody. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
I need a volunteer for the to recite the Motzi. I'll do the Kiddush tonight. Do I have a volunteer to come and hey, please.
Please rise.
We give thanks to God for friend. Our voices rise in song together. As on earth the Sunday said, Baruch Eloheinu Melech Haolam, every promise.
I'm going to take rabbinic priority. You notice that I gave the Kiddush cup to our wonderful music director, Chris, who shared it with his engaged. They just became engaged, and we want to wish them a wonderful Mazal Tov to both of you. Please rise for the benediction. Adonai oz li'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. May God give spiritual strength to God's people, and may God bless us and bless the world with peace and wholeness of life. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Oh, we also want to welcome Joseph and Christina Metz and their little girl, Amelia. Please welcome them. They just moved to our area, so we're really excited that they're here. And we love children, so wonderful. Thank you. Again, Shabbat Shalom.